All right, good morning. We are continuing our study of the women of the Bible. Our theme is from Proverbs chapter 31, verse 30. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. So in this study, we're studying godly women of the Bible and how they exemplify the Beatitudes taught by Jesus in Matthew chapter 5. And in Matthew 5, verse 8, Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." So let's define our terms. First, what does it mean to be pure in heart? This is one I just kind of always
do the right thing.
I like that one. I like that.
Seek after God.
Okay. Anybody else?
And think about what we're doing. What would we do if God were looking over our shoulder?
Yeah.
Which he is.
Yeah, pretty much is.
Kathy,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not hearing what they're saying. What?
Oh, I'm sorry. They're saying that, that we're acting as if God is right there, and, knowing that God is watching us. Our actions are pure. I already forgot what you said.
They're always trying to do God's will.
Always trying to do God's will was another comment. Doing the right thing. Yes? Okay. All right. So anybody else with a definition on pure in heart? Okay. The Greek word is katharos. The term means clean, pure, or clear. And the heart, of course, refers to the mind, that is our thoughts and our feelings. So when we think of pure in heart here in the context, we can think of singleness of motive, that is a pure focus. And so one definition that Jesus is talking about here is a person with singleness of purpose in devotion to God. No distractions, don't allow those, just singleness of focus. Everything else has been removed. So when we're looking at Ruth demonstrated purity of heart by her single-minded devotion in caring for Naomi. And she did so through her words, through her actions, and in obedience. So let's kind of set the context here. Let's go ahead and read Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 to 5, please.
Now it came about in the days when the judges spoke that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem in Judah. Now they entered the land of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They took for themselves Moabite women as wives. The name of one was Orpah, the name of the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the woman was bereft of her 2 children and her husband.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Ruth is during the time of the judges. So between the time that Moses led Israel and the time when kings started ruling Israel, there's about 350 to 400 years, and that's referred to as the time of the judges. If you read through the book of Judges, it's just this constant disobedience, turning away from God. Then God sends punishment in the form of their neighbors ruling over them, and then they repent, and God sends a judge to basically redeem them, to save them. So this was not a great time in the history of Israel, pretty much. But Ruth lived during that time of the judges. And so there's a famine, and Elimelech left Canaan and took his wife and sons to Moab. 10 years pass, Elimelech and the 2 sons die. Now, to be a childless widow at this time was about as desperate a situation as you could be in. There's no social programs. There's nothing structured to help people. And with no family for help or protection, one would have been completely dependent on, maybe your kindness of your neighbors, strangers. I mean, you would have been in a desperate begging situation. Now, God clearly has a deep concern for these very vulnerable people. In the law given by Moses, God made very specific provisions for widows. And warned against the mistreatment of widows and orphans. Exodus 22, verse 22, Deuteronomy 24, 19, and then in chapter 25, verse 5, very specific commands, very specific provisions, and basically do not mess with a widow or an orphan, because God is watching out for widows and orphans. And in fact, in Psalm 68, verse 5, God calls himself a father to the fatherless and protector of widows. We know from the New Testament, we have James 1:27 and 1 Timothy 5:3. God continues to show his concern for widows. Okay. So in the rest of, or in verses 6 to 14 of chapter 1 of Ruth, we see that Naomi decides to return to her hometown. Clearly it's not working out where she's at. Her situation just keeps, she wouldn't have left if her situation was good. Okay. So she decides to return to Judah, to her hometown. And then in verse 7, we see that both daughters-in-law start the journey with her. And they obviously cared deeply for each other. And because she cared for them, Naomi urged her daughters-in-law to return to the protection of their mother's house. She can't provide for them. She can't protect them. She has no sons, no husband. And she said, you need to return to your mother's house. You need the protection and the provision that I can't provide. And tearfully in verse 14, Orpah does, but Ruth will not. And so we see the first way that Ruth expressed her purity of devotion. Ruth used words to express her purity of devotion to Naomi. So let's go ahead and read Ruth chapter 1, verse 15 to 18, please.
And she said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. And your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death part you me. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking.
Thank you. All right, so Ruth here, she tells Naomi, don't ask me to leave you. Wherever you are, that's where I'm going to be. Whoever is important to you is important to me, and that her life was devoted to Naomi. Nothing but death will separate us. This is just such a beautiful commitment, a statement of commitment here. But Ruth very beautifully expressed her single-minded devotion, that is her purity of heart, to care for Naomi. And Naomi's just kind of like, at this point, I'm not, she stops, there comes a point where you stop arguing with someone. And after a speech like that, okay, I'm not going to argue anymore. She hears her determination there. Let's go ahead and read verses 19 to 20, please.
Now the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it happened when they had came to Bethlehem that all the city was excited because of them. And the woman said, is this Naomi? And then she said, oops, am I supposed to read it? And then she said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Marian. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me.
Could you go ahead and read verse 21, please?
And I went out full, and the Lord was brought to me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has afflicted me?
Okay. So after 10 years away, Naomi returned home. Now, clearly this must have been a small town. People remembered her. Everybody turns out, oh, there's a stranger, it's exciting. Almost reminds me of when we went up to visit Nathan. There's like 3,000 people in town and strangers are noticed. Okay. So after 10 years away, Naomi returned home feeling like she had nothing. That's what she says. I have nothing. I went out full. I came back with nothing. And God is against me. When you say God has afflicted me, God has worked against me. Now, if I'd been Ruth and I'd just given this speech, maybe a few days earlier because they had to travel, I might have been a little hurt. Ruth had left everyone and everything she knew and promised her devotion to Naomi. But Naomi tells the entire town that she has nothing. Okay, but what we see is Ruth got to work. Okay, before I run on, any comments so far?
You said something about 10 years.
Yes.
Where's the 10 years?
In chapter 1, verse 4. They stayed there about 10 years.
with the son.
Yeah, at the very end, it says they lived there about 10 years
Son with
in Moab.
Oh, they took up there about 10.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't go on, it didn't make sense.
Okay, all right. So what we see here is that Ruth got to work. Okay, so that brings us to our second point, that Ruth used actions to express her purity of devotion to Naomi. Let's go ahead and read, please, Ruth 2, verses 1 to 7.
Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after one in whose sight I might find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. So she departed and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, may the Lord be with you. And they said to him, may the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, she is the young Moabite woman who returned Naomi from the land of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. Thus she came and has remained from the morning until now. She has been sitting in the house for a little while.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I mentioned God's very practical care for widows and orphans. And in Leviticus 19, verse 9, reads, now when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. And you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. In Deuteronomy 19, verse 19 repeats this command to provide for the needy. I mean, very practical provision here. If you drop something when you're gathering up all of these stalks of grain, if you drop some, you don't pick them up. You leave them there. You don't go to the corners. You provide for the needy, and that's called gleaning. And so in Ruth chapter 2, verse 2, Ruth wants to go glean in the fields. That is, she's asking to go pick up the leftovers, whatever has fallen to the ground. Okay, now verse 5, Boaz comes, he owns the field, he comes to talk to his workers, and he sees a stranger. Again, small town, who is this? And there's a stranger in the field, and he's told that this is the young woman who returned with Naomi. She's polite and a hard worker. Okay, everybody knows the story of Naomi now. And Boaz and his workers see Ruth's devotion to Naomi in action. She's been working in the sun all day, picking up individual stalks of grain to provide food. That's hard work, right? I mean, I'm just picturing, even if I were in my 20s, bending down and picking up individual grains that have just, happened to fall all day long, stooping down to, that's a long, and for me, it's a long way down to the ground.
They were scattered.
Yeah, they were scattered. So it's not like she just, gathers up a whole bunch, because she's not one of the reapers. She has to go and pick up the individual ones that have fallen down and up and down. I mean, yeah, but she's a hard worker. She's using her actions to express that purity of devotion, because she's going to help Naomi. She has said she would. She's putting it into action now. And then chapter 2, verse 8 says, then Boaz said to Ruth, listen carefully, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw. Okay? Now, she's a stranger in a strange land. She's a woman with no protection. That's not the safest. I mean, at least they, might yell at her or something like that. But, it's not a very safe situation to be in. So we see Boaz saying, offering protection here, and he responds to Ruth's Ruth's purity of heart with generosity and with protection. Say, stay here, work with my women, work with the women who work for me here. Here's water over here. You don't have to worry about getting your own water, because again, just because you let someone glean in your field doesn't mean that you have to protect them, doesn't mean that you can't throw a rock at them or yell at them, or that you have to share your water with them when they get hot and thirsty. But he's offering all of these things. And then we see in chapter or verse 10 to 16, Naomi is just overwhelmed with his kindness. It's kind of like, I'm a stranger, I'm a foreigner, and you're being so kind to me. And Boaz tells her he's heard about her devotion to Naomi. He invites her to eat lunch with them when they stop working to eat lunch with the reapers there. And then when she gets back to work in verse 16, this is so sweet. When she gets up, she leaves, and when she's out of earshot, he tells his reapers to purposely drop extra grain for her. I mean, he didn't want to embarrass her or anything, but he says, you know what? You be sure you drop some extra stuff for her. Make sure she gets plenty. So it's just such a wonderful story. I just love the story. But anyway, in verse 17, by the end of the day, Ruth has about an ephah of barley. Now, according to Google, and take that with a grain of salt, but according to Google, that would make enough bread to feed 2 people for 5 days. And if you are destitute and you suddenly have enough food for 5 days, that's incredible. That gets Naomi's attention, okay? Because she just kind of, I just kind of pictured Naomi so depressed, so despondent. I've got nothing. God has been against me and has taken everything from me. I mean, that's what she expresses in chapter 1. And then all of a sudden, Ruth comes back just, carrying an ephah is, I think 22 liters. So picture a 2-liter bottle and times 11. Okay. That's how much she's bringing back. And that gets Naomi's attention. She goes, what, where have you been? Is what she asks. And so she's, where have you been? And so she finds out that not only has Ruth gotten all of this food, for them, but she's been working in the field of a near kinsman. Aha! There is more of how God protected. So we see Naomi's response. Yeah, it was a coincidence, but we're going to let that alone. So we see Naomi's response in verse 20. May he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness from the living and from the dead. So Ruth's purity of devotion is having an impact on Naomi. It didn't at first. I mean, yeah, she was probably glad for the company, but she was still depressed, despondent. God is working against me. God has hurt me. Now Naomi is saying that, the one who had called herself empty and believed that God had caused her pain and suffering in chapter 1, verse 21. Now Naomi praises God's kindness in providing food and providing protection. Okay. So any comments on?
Yes, Kathy. In chapter 2, verse 4, that verse stood out for me. Says, when Boaz came to his reapers, he said to them, "The Lord be with you." And they answered him, "The Lord bless you." That tells you a whole lot about
Oh yeah,
Boaz as the man in
absolutely.
charge and the reapers as his workers, what kind of
Uh-huh.
a relationship they had.
Boaz is a good guy.
Yeah.
Um,
And his reapers were good workers.
yes, they were.
They had a really good relationship.
Yep. So thirdly, we see that Ruth used obedience to express her purity of devotion to Naomi. Part of the protection that God provided for widows was a husband from one of the near relatives. You're not going to send her out. You're not going to just, kick her out of the family. You're going to find her a husband. You're not going to find a stranger. You're going to find someone within the family here. And that's from Deuteronomy 25, verse 5. So let's go ahead and read Ruth chapter 3, verse 1 to 5, please.
This thing.
Oh, yes.
Had all these workers, they were working men paid for their ability, and these young women come in. There had to be.
There were instances when, yeah.
There was.
Yeah.
There was probably some harm that came to some of the young women, but they were because, in my mind, it's because he ordered them strictly to leave them alone, that it was a natural process for men and women.
Well, if nothing else, they might have yelled at her or, thrown something at her or, push her out of the way or something. Yeah, in some way. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, things happen, but he's very strictly, leave her alone. Don't, and he tells them, it's kind of like, don't yell at her, don't, let's see, where, that he gives. Oh yeah, he says in chapter 2, verse 15, let her glean even among the sheaves and do not insult her. Leave her alone. Don't, just don't bother her. All right. So where was I? Oh, did we?
know if the reapers, some people are paid by the amount they bring in, some people are paid by the day. If they're being paid by what they're bringing in, they're not gonna like dropping extra.
That's true.
that They've already.
That's true. But again, Boaz being the type of employer he was, it seemed like that wasn't an issue. So
Something to be it.
Yeah.
It sounds like not just for Ruth, but for others.
But
He
was
might
also
have.
Present.
yes.
Yeah, he was talking.
But like if you're picking cotton, you're paid by how much you bring
Mhm.
in. And so,
Yeah.
if you're having to drop for people, there can be some resentment.
But but again, with them trusting Boaz because of the relationship they have, then they're, he's not going to cheat them or anything, I think. So
Oh,
But
I don't
again,
think
but
so
yeah,
either, But I'm
but
talking
yeah,
about
it's
attitude of the men.
exactly. If you're out and you have some foreigner coming in and gleaning in your field, it's kind of like, wait a minute, you're pulling food from my family's mouth. It would be hard not to think that way.
I mean, I don't know.
And more lenient toward Ruth and Naomi because
She
was kin to.
All right, Ruth chapter 3, verse 1 to 5, please.
Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now is not Boaz our kinsman with those maids you were? Behold, the winnow's barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. She said to her, all that you say I will do.
All right, so we're seeing that thirdly, that Ruth used obedience here to express her purity of devotion to Naomi. Ruth has been single-mindedly devoted to Naomi, and now Naomi, to me, she kind of gets out of her depression enough to start kind of looking around at somebody else's needs. And what's the best way to ignore bad things that are happening is focus on somebody else's needs. And so, well, yeah, she does. But again, that's how a widow was protected there. So, okay, so she, the best way for Ruth to be taken care of at that time was to be married. So Naomi basically told Ruth to put herself at Boaz's mercy. Ruth was not an Israelite. The law didn't apply to her. She wasn't obligated under the law. What if Boaz was the wrong sort? It's their only interaction has been during the day with a bunch of people around. And now Naomi has told her, go in the dark and, and lay down near him. But Ruth responded in verse 5, all that you say, I will do. So she responded with obedience. Now, and we know the story, of course, Ruth obeys Naomi. Boaz is startled awake in the middle of the night and sees this, female figure. And it's kind of like, hello, who are you? And, and then, Ruth tells him that he's a near kinsman. And in verse 9, asks him to marry her. It's great. And he responds in verse 11, so now my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you say, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. But there's an obstacle. In all good romances, there's an obstacle, okay? There's a nearer kinsman. All right. But now we see Boaz act with purity of heart, with singleness of devotion, because he will not rest until the matter is settled. Naomi knows this, and that's what she says in verse 18 of chapter 3.
Mine says in verse 9, at the end of the passage, it says, take your maidservant under your wing,
Mm-hmm.
for you are a close relative. And down here at the bottom, it says, or spread the corner of your garment over your maidservant.
Yeah. Like basically,
Tell me if
You're-
you want me
yeah.
to be here.
right, you're a near
So-
kinsman. Here are the rules about, he knows the law about near kinsman and a widow. If you have a widow, there's a near kinsman. The nearest kinsman raises children in the name of the deceased husband. So that was the rule. And so she's saying, hey, so again, it's just such a wonderful story here. So, and then we see the results. So first we have Ruth showing her devotion, her purity of devotion through her words, through her actions, through her obedience. And now we see the result of that. Ruth's purity of heart, that is her single-minded devotion, began with a feeling expressed in a speech. It was followed by action, and it was refined by obedience. Let's read the result in Ruth chapter 4, verse 13 to 17, please.
Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more than you, had 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, the father of David.
Thank you. All right, so we have the conclusion of this wonderful story that,
Imagine having married one of your cousins.
well, it wasn't actually, she wasn't related to him, but
She was, but I'm just thinking that's how it is. You're supposed to marry a
Probably.
close relative. It
well,
would be a cousin probably.
or an in-law. I mean, if you were from a different family, then it could have just been an in-law. Anyway,
That's right. That's right.
yeah. All right. So I just love this story. No, there were rules about that too. So they couldn't marry too close, because that
Yeah,
was very clearly set out in the
Her
law.
husband's cousins, not her
Right,
cousins.
right.
Apparently, he was a good bit over
Yes.
parenting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he calls,
Right.
right. You could have gone after much younger men. Again, Matthew 5:8 says, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. I mean, just the blessing that she ended up with. I mean, she had been facing a life of poverty and probably danger from occasion, certainly not great treatment because she's a foreigner. And then now she has a husband, a child. She still has Naomi.
And 2 mother-in-law.
Well, if he was old enough, she might not have had another mother-in-law. But she has, you never know. But again, it's just such a wonderful story, and just such, you see the kindness of these people. I mean, so many stories in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, people are behaving terribly, especially in the time of Judges. They're just behaving really, really poorly. But here we have Boaz, who's an upright, responsible man. His workers trust him and praise him. Naomi's this wonderful person who is deeply loved by her daughters-in-law.
There's a lot of good
It's
stories
just
about women.
Yeah, and this is there's some others, but this is just don't make me mention Jezebel. But again, this is just a wonderful story, and I really love that. Now, Matthew 5:8 says, Blessed are the pure in heart. And I think we've established Ruth was pure in heart. But it says, For they will see God. Okay, now what does that part mean? Now we know we cannot see God face to face in this life. That's 1 John 4:12. That's, a variety of other scriptures. So how did Ruth see God? And I'm going to claim that she saw God 3 ways. First, she saw God's mercy. I mean, because of God's mercy, he provided for them. They were in desperate need and God provided. Because of God's mercy, God protected them. You don't get much more protection than marrying a rich man at this point. I mean, she is guaranteed protection. She has a son now. Huh?
Romance novels.
Yep. She has a son now. That's future protection because, what was Social Security then? What was your security in your old age was your children, especially your sons. Because that's who could take care of you. So Ruth saw God's mercy. Ruth saw God's redemption. Redemption just means buying back or delivering. And Boaz, God used Boaz to deliver Ruth from poverty and danger. And thirdly, Ruth was part of God's promise. We see Jesus through the line of Ruth. She was grandmother. Great grandmother. Boaz, Obed, David. She was a great grandmother of David, who was, of course, the ancestor of Jesus. So it's just, I know. You can't, I mean, all these things, all this hardship, all these decisions that led her to this point. She couldn't possibly know how things would turn out. When she left her home, her people, her language, everything to go with Naomi, she couldn't possibly know that she would have a life other than hardship and danger and destitution. But she chose that because of her focus, her purity of heart, her dedication to Naomi, and God blessed her.
That happens to us too. You just don't know it. Like you're saying, things that we do, you don't always know who you touched,
Right.
how that happened, what their life is, because now you never know that.
Yeah.
So there's always
I mean, we do these things, and like you say, we may never know how we've affected other people. And yet, it's kind of like, well, why did I do this? Well, you do it because it's the right thing. You don't necessarily get the rewards. You don't necessarily see the rewards, but you do it because of purity of heart, because our focus is to do the right thing.
Well, God definitely had a plan for Ruth because she was married for 10 years.
Yeah.
Didn't have children.
That's right. Because it does say that that God enabled her. Let's see. Her husband, yeah. Yeah, and verse 13 says the Lord enabled her to conceive. So, yeah, a blessing from God. Any other comments?
What,
Or here.
Kathy, what was it about number 2, redemption? Did you make some other comments about the redemption?
Oh, just that God used Boaz to deliver, that is, to redeem Ruth from poverty and danger.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So a little application. I mean, this is a great story, but I like application. So I like great stories too. But both Ruth and Orpah felt and expressed a deep love for Naomi. But purity of heart from Matthew chapter 5 is more than a feeling. It's a single-minded, unwavering devotion to God that is expressed through words, actions, and obedience. I mean, we just apply that right to ourselves. First, to be pure in heart from Matthew chapter 5, verse 8, we use our words. 1 Peter 3 verse 15 says, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, but with gentleness and respect. We are called to be ready to speak on God's behalf, to confess that Jesus is Lord, to stand firm on that, gently and respectfully, but we can't hide that. And sometimes in today's society, it would be a lot more comfortable just to not say anything or just to keep quiet. But but to be pure in heart must be expressed through our words.
You hear somebody say something, I know it's happened to all of us, and you go, but the Bible says you're not to do, or the Bible says you are to do, and they'll go, it does?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you go, yeah.
Yeah. Secondly, through our actions. Mark chapter 16, verse 16, Jesus said, the one who has believed and has been baptized will be saved. There are things that God calls us to do in response, not just to feel, but to act on what we know, to be pure in heart. Third, we refine that purity of heart through obedience every day, all of our lives, up until the end of our lives. And I was telling Sam the other day, it's kind of like, shouldn't there come a point where I don't keep trying to be better? Because we were talking about something, and he says, nope. Like, thanks. But again, we refine that purity of heart through obedience. I know. Or this one little thing, I can hang on to that. But again, what's purity? It's getting rid of anything like that. John 14:15, Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And then in Revelation 2, verse 10, he says, be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. It doesn't say be faithful until it's hard. Be faithful when you feel like it. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. There is a purity in each of these, in always being ready to speak, in being willing to be obedient, and then in continuing or being willing to act, and then continuing that purity in our obedience.
Revelation 2:10, I heard it expressed from a pulpit that it says, be patient until death, but it was expressed that actually can mean unto death, even if it takes your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. But again, there are so many distractions in our minds, and there's so many, it's not even impure thoughts, but it's just impurities and things that get between us and God. Our minds get so crowded. Day-to-day stuff just distracts us and gets us off focus.
That does anybody have the problem when you're praying that your mind will wander off on something else that's personal? And I have said to the Father,
Sorry.
if someone were talking to me and the way I'm talking to you and my mind is wandering, I would be so upset. Father, forgive. Does that happen?
I chase rabbits all the time.
Oof.
No, you're the only one.
It's like, why did I go that way?
Yeah.
So much.
Yep. But our minds do get distracted, and there's so much crowding in, and there's so many day-to-day things that it's hard to be pure in heart, in dedication to God. But God helps us. Psalm.
Sometimes
Yep.
I feel guilty because I have thought something for so long, and the more I study, you go back and you read something and it means something different to you. When you go back and I go, I haven't been looking at this right. I've been doing all this wrong,
Well, that's the thing, and it's a blessing with God, is that we can start from now and do it right. And he's kind of like, and they're rejoicing for us. I mean, but Psalm 66 verse 10 reads, for you have put us to the test, God. You have refined us as silver is refined. Silver is refined with heat to burn out the impurity. God will help us be pure of heart. Just like if we pray for patience, he will help us by helping us experience patience and practice patience. Go ahead.
Well, what we need to remember is that during this purification process, he does not take his eyes off of us.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
good.
And God is there helping us through this. He doesn't just throw us in something and just leave us to sink or swim. I mean, God is always right there. Absolutely. He's always right there with us. James 1 verse 2 says, consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials. And he doesn't stop there. He doesn't just say, enjoy the bad stuff. You're going to be miserable, but you're going to be happy about it. No,
That's a hard one.
he says, knowing, because there's a purpose, that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. There is a purpose for God letting us struggle. Okay. It's like a butterfly. Butterfly has to struggle. If you don't let the butterfly struggle, the butterfly is going to die. That's just how it is.
Don't sleep.
I did not know that. Thank you.
My mind kind of just.
Onward here. All right. So God,
Couple baby Kit Kats.
yeah. So God's goal for us is to remove any impurity from our hearts so that we may see him. Again, the whole purpose, pure in heart, so that we may see God. Okay? And we can see God right now through Jesus. John 14, verse 9, Jesus said, the one who has seen me has seen the Father. And we can demonstrate the love of Jesus to each other. We can show each other what it's like to be in the presence of God because of that love, because of the love that Jesus has shown us. He has shown us the Father. And then, go ahead.
I read an illustration one time about the struggles that we go through and we come out stronger. And there was a woman walking through the forest and she saw this, what do you call the butterfly before it's born? Anyway,
yeah.
it was struggling to come out, and she took a little nail file from her pocket and she helped the butterfly out. And the butterfly came out and fluttered a little bit and fell dead.
Yep.
If it had not gone through the struggle, it couldn't survive.
Yep.
And that has helped me personally thinking about struggling.
Mhm.
Makes us stronger.
Oh yeah. So we see God now through Jesus, through the blessings that we have. We will also see God in heaven. And that, I mean, face to face. I mean, 1 John 3:2 says, we know that when he appears, we will be like him because we will see him just as he is. The creator of the universe, we will see face to face. The creator of the universe will dry our tears, will give us a robe and a crown, will want us with him forever. I mean, when you think about the universe, I think the Voyager probe has gone beyond our solar system now. And it's just, the pictures that have been sent back and all the amazing things. But that creator wants relationship with us, face-to-face relationship with us. It's amazing.
Can't you see St. Peter at the pearly gates, me in line with all my cats behind me?
Good luck with that. All right. Any other comments on the text here or the lesson here?
My mind wanders, I'm sorry.
Any other comments? Okay. All right. So finishing up Matthew 5:8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Ruth was pure in heart. She had one focus, one goal, one purpose, caring for Naomi. Nothing got in the way, not things that Naomi said, not hardships, not danger, not destitution. She was focused on caring for Naomi. And we can be pure in heart if we have that same kind of single-minded focus in our devotion and obedience to God. And I want to finish with 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 61, which reads, be wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord our God, to walk in his statutes and to keep his commandments. Thank you so much for your time and for your comments.